most of the history of mankind, we have been following the old European construct. Namely, property was limited to being owned by a small upper crust of people. Almost everyone had no private property at all. You had the lord of the manor who owned a big house, a castle, whatever. And you had all of these other people who lived on his land, paid high taxes to him, but did not own their land. What they had was only the illusion of freedom. Yes, they could marry, they could have a little business, but they were heavily taxed, and they didn't really have freedom. They didn't own their land. That was the European model. That was the European model that was brought to this country under the tyrant King George. He was a tyrant. The British soldiers could walk up to your house, write out a search warrant on a piece of paper, break down the door, take what they wanted, throw you out, live in your house. If you spoke in the public square or wrote in the public square against King George, you could be arrested by the British soldiers, spirited away, and never heard from again. These were the abuses of freedom against which our founders formed our revolution. They wrote the Declaration of Independence because of these abuses by King George the tyrant. The Constitution that they wrote specifically so that those abuses would never ever appear in this country again. And we'll get into that. After the revolution, when we were victorious, the founders recognized they had a unique opportunity. Here we were in the New World, a new country. We weren't living in Europe. We didn't have years of tradition that said only a few people can own land and no one else can. Here we were in a new country, and the founders said, we want to create a system in which there is true individual freedom, and it's based upon life, liberty, and property, which is what Jefferson originally wanted. They had the ability to get rid of all those old rules and write a constitution that protects and secures private property rights in all forms from theft by the government. You know, of course, that the coin of freedom has two sides. One side is individual freedom, but the other side is personal responsibility. The founders took those two concepts, put them together into the coin of freedom, and then wrote a constitution to protect us all against those who would steal our freedom and enslave us. All of this is based upon the concept of natural law rights. Natural law rights are rights that are ours by dint of our humanity. They are rights that are secure because they come from God. They're not given to us by man, by government. Natural law rights are rights of self-protection, property ownership, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The most important thing that I can say about natural law rights is that they impose no obligation on anyone else. I have the right to pursue happiness, but I do not have the right to require you to give me happiness. I have the right to free speech. I can set up a soapbox in front of this hotel. You have the right to walk by me and completely ignore me if that's what you choose to do. I cannot legally compel you to stop in front of me and listen to what I have to say. You have the right to earn money to provide yourself and your family with food, clothing, and shelter. But you do not have the right to compel me to provide food, clothing, and shelter to you and your family. I may do so out of charity if I want, but you may not compel me to do so. That's what natural law rights are. They are true individual rights. And if you take those individual rights with personal responsibility That's when you have true freedom like we had 235 years ago, when our founders were smart enough to recognize that private property rights could be protected in a way in this new world that had not been possible before in Europe. Now, we come upon government-issued rights, or rights claimed by individuals. If someone says to you, I have the right to food, for instance, your response should be, at whose expense? Because when they claim a right, or when the government gives you or gives someone a right, that enforces an obligation on some third unrelated party to provide that good or service to you. That's the problem with government rights. It enslaves the provider. It enslaves the provider to the recipient. I thought we got rid of slavery in this country. Apparently not. So what does this all have to do with Obamacare? Well, first of all, it has to do with that basic question, okay? Is medical care a right? And I say absolutely not. You do not have the right to receive medical care. You do not have the right to receive medical services. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get them. I am not an evil person. People, yes, they need to have medical care. Our job as a society is to figure out how everyone should get medical care in a way that everyone's rights and everyone's freedom is protected. If the government says you have a right to care, and you, Dr. Dan Eichenbaum, have got to provide that care for a fee that I decide, at hours I decide, and in a manner that I decide you must do it, am I free? Absolutely not. I'm a slave. I have been enslaved by my government to provide a good or services to some unrelated third party against my will. So that's what Obamacare has to do with the previous discussion about individual rights. Medical care is a service offered by a trained provider to a willing recipient, for agreed upon fee. Is medical care a necessity? Absolutely. So is food. So does shelter. But I don't have the rights to food and shelter. Several weeks ago was Constitution Week, and I gave lectures in the public schools at the 10th grade civics classes in Cherokee County. And I said to them, so tell me, do you have the right to eat? Well, what 10th grader doesn't think he has the right to eat? Well, that was a really dumb question on my part. Yeah, they all said, well, I said, okay, here's what you do. I want you to go to the supermarket, fill your cart up with groceries, go up to the checkout lane, and say to the cashier, I don't have to pay for these, I have the right to eat. See if you can get out of the lane. And that's the example I use to show them that that's not a right. It is a necessity. But when you think about it, over the next year, I may see the doctor once or twice if I'm reasonably healthy. But I'm going to eat about 1,000 meals. I'm going to sleep about 300 and some nights, maybe fewer or lesser. I need a bed. I need clothing and all the other things that I need. I have to provide those for myself. I'm not going to require you to provide those for me. That would enslave you, and I won't do that.